In the previous video, we plotted all the animation that was on our zombie's facial control rig into F-curves so that it's ready for export. In this video, we'll store our zombie's facial animation in point cache files and then apply those files to a matching head in Softimage. These cache files can also be used in Maya or 3ds Max. Caching stores the positions of an object's points at each frame to a file. Cache files let you keep the pipeline open between Face Robot and your other 3D software. This means that once you've applied the cache files, you can continue to make adjustments to the animation in Face Robot, generate new cache files, and reapply them. We'll continue where we left off in Face Robot with the FR10 start scene. Before we cache the animation, our zombie needs to have a neutral pose that we can use as a base shape for some operations we'll do in Softimage in the next video. It's also generally good practice to have a neutral pose available for your character when you export its animation. Change the start frame in the timeline to 0 to add a frame before the plotted animation starts. On the Act panel, click the Pose tab and apply the 0 pose to the face rig controls. This sets all the controls to their neutral position. On the Select tab, click the Key All button to set a key for each control in this pose at frame 0. With this key in place, we're ready to start caching. Choose Plot Cache Manager from the Animate menu to open the Cache Manager. Click the Right tab, then select the path where you want to save your cache files. We'll use the default file name, which is the object's name plus its version. The version name can be anything that identifies these cache files, such as Take 1, Take 2, or Final. You can set the default path and file name in the simulation preferences so that these are the ones displayed each time you use the Cache Manager. There are several cache file formats from which you can choose. The iceCache format caches an object's point positions in either local or global space in .icecache files, and is used mostly for ice simulations. But you can also use this format to cache the Face Robot animation if you're going to use the cache files in Softimage. The Point Cache 2 or PC2 format caches the object's point positions only in global space in .pc2 files. You can use these cache files in Softimage and other 3D software, but PC2 is more of a legacy format. That leaves the nCache format, which we're going to select because it creates cache files that are compatible with Softimage, Maya, and 3ds Max. The nCache format caches an object's point positions in .mc files and creates a .xml description file for each object that refers to these MC files. Select the zombie's head and all of its parts. And add them to the list of objects whose geometry will be cached. On the Additional Options tab, set the start and end values for the range of frames you want to cache, which is 0 to 425 in this case. We'll leave the interval step at 1 because we want to cache every frame. The Attributes lists contain the object's attributes that are available to cache and which ones will be cached. Because we're creating a geometry cache, only the object's point position attribute will be cached. We'll select the Create Caches List option to make a list file that refers to each object's cache file that will be created. You don't need to select this option to create a cache file for each object, but it makes it more efficient to later load all the cache files at once in Softimage. We'll name this file frall.cacheslist. Select the All Transform option to cache the transformations of the objects in global space, not just their deformations. This allows the translation and rotation of the eyes and teeth to be cached in this scene. Back on the Caching Files tab, click the Right Cache button to create the cache files. With the cache files created, you're ready to apply them to a matching zombie head in Softimage, Maya, or 3ds Max. Let's first save our Face Robot scene, then turn off the Face Robot mode, which unloads the Face Robot operators and switches to the Softimage interface layout. It's important to actually disable Face Robot mode when you don't need to work in Face Robot anymore, and not just switch to the Softimage layout. Otherwise, the Face Robot operators and layout are loaded every time you open this scene, which is not desirable when you just want to work in a standard Softimage scene. Choose the Disable Face Robot command, then select the option to Disable Face Robot and start a new scene. Now we're going to apply the cache files to the same zombie head and parts in the Softimage scene that we started out with in part 1 of this series. We need to put the head object into the zombie model so that its cache files are applied in this model's mixer node. Models are like mini scenes that let you easily group, manipulate, and export objects that need to stay together, such as a character. We're also going to parent the face parts to the head to make it easier to select and manipulate all these objects at once. The number of points and their IDs that are stored for each object in its cache file must match that of the object to which you apply the file. And the location of each object's center in global space needs to be at the world origin to match what's stored in the cache file. Let's start at the top and move the whole zombie model to the world origin. You can see that the head and the eyes also have translation values that are not at the world origin. So select the head and change its translation values to 0 to move it to the origin. The left and right eyeballs are in the correct position in relation to the head, but their centers are not at the origin, and their rotations are not at 0. To fix this, we need to freeze the translation and rotation on the eyes, which resets their centers to the default values without moving the object's points in global space. We can freeze both the translation and rotation on the eyeballs at the same time by choosing the Transform Freeze All Transforms command. You could also choose the Freeze Translation and Freeze Rotation commands separately if you didn't want to also freeze the scaling. While we don't need to use the body geometry in this scene, we'll move it to the origin as well so that it fits with the head. Now everything's set up to apply the cache files. Open the Cache Manager again and click the Read tab. Select the .caches list file from the browser to load it. If the file doesn't load all the separate cache files in the cache list the first time, select it again. This is a known issue with Softimage version 2012. If you didn't create a .caches list, you need to load each object's .xml file individually. Clear the Apply to Objects list, then middle-click the head to select it and the face parts, and add them to this list. It's important that the cache files match the objects, so move the items up and down in either of the lists to make sure that each cache file corresponds to the correct object. If you hadn't already moved the object centers to the world origin, selecting the All Transform option automatically resets the object's transforms to 0 before the cache files are applied to them. However, it's better to set the transforms of the objects yourself because you have more control over each object in the scene, especially if you need to freeze the transforms, as we did for the eyeballs. With each cache file matching its object, click the Apply All button to apply the cache files to the objects. When you scrub the timeline, you see our zombie's head deform and move just as it did in Face Robot. You can move the head to another location, and the cache files still work. For each object that has a cache file, a mixer operator is added in the modeling region of its construction stack. That's because each cache file is actually a cache clip in the zombie model's animation mixer. This lets you move the clips along the timeline so that the facial animation starts at the frame you want. You can also scale the clips to speed up or slow down the animation. Or drag the lower corner of a clip to create cycles of the animation. And if you had multiple cache clips for the same object, you could even blend them together. However, we'll leave the cache clips as they are for now. One thing that's missing from the face robot scene is our zombie's voice, which is an easy thing to add in the mixer. Choose Track, Add Audio Track, or press Shift-U to add an audio track in the mixer. Then right-click anywhere on this track and choose Load Source from File. Go to the project's audio folder and select the brains.wav file. It appears as a clip on the track. Drag the clip to start at frame 310, where it was in our face robot scene. Now play back to hear our zombie's voice again.
Please, sir, may I have some more brains?
You could now go back to Face Robot and tweak the animation and create new cache files. Then bring these cache files back into Softimage. In the next video, we'll cover 2 ways in which you can use this head with a rigged character in Softimage.